Imagine yourself walking into a church, surrounded by images of the man who changed history. As you look at these representations, you notice that many portray Jesus as a man with fair skin, straight hair, and blue eyes. This is the image many of us grew up seeing, a depiction that has deeply rooted itself in our culture and spirituality. But what if I told you that this view might be far from reality? What if, instead, Jesus had darker skin, reflecting the features of his people and his land? This question isn't just about Jesus' skin color. It's a profound reflection on race, identity, and the true essence of his message. Jesus is one of the most influential and debated figures in human history. However, perceptions of his appearance are often shaped by cultural and artistic influences, predominantly Western. Over time, representations of Jesus have been filtered through a lens that frequently overlooks his historical and cultural roots. So what does the Bible actually say about Jesus' appearance, and how does this affect our understanding of his message and mission? As we delve into this discussion, we can't ignore that the question of Jesus' skin color goes beyond mere historical curiosity. It's an invitation to re-examine how his image has been used throughout centuries and how it shapes our perceptions of him today. For many, the image of a black Jesus isn't merely an alternative to the Eurocentric depiction, but a powerful symbol of resistance, identity, and solidarity with the marginalized. In this video, we'll dive into the scriptures, examining what the Bible says about Jesus' appearance and the cultural significance of this discussion. When it comes to biblical descriptions, the truth is that the Bible offers only limited direct information about Jesus' physical appearance. This scarcity of detail is notable, especially considering Jesus' significance in the Christian faith. However, what we do find in Scripture can offer valuable clues that challenge conventional assumptions. One of the most revealing verses is found in Isaiah 53:2, which states, "He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him." This passage is often interpreted as a prophecy about Jesus, emphasizing that his relevance was not based on attractive physical features. This idea contrasts with a culture that often values external beauty, suggesting that Jesus' power lay in his character, his spiritual authority, and his transformative teachings. This verse invites us to look beyond superficial appearance and focus on the depth of his being. This aspect of rejecting superficial beauty is particularly relevant in a contemporary world that often idolizes aesthetics. The emphasis on Jesus' inner beauty is a powerful message, teaching us that true greatness is not found in physical appearance, but in the integrity, love, and compassion one can offer. This is reflected in his mission to love and serve the marginalized, showing that a person's worth goes far beyond what can be seen. Another aspect to consider is found in Revelation 1:14-15. Where Jesus is described with hair white like wool, eyes like blazing fire, and feet like polished bronze. While these descriptions are often interpreted as symbolic, the comparison of his feet to polished bronze could suggest a darker skin tone, common among the people of the Middle East. This description is not merely a matter of physical appearance, but represents Jesus' divine character and power after the resurrection. Here, the vision of a glorified Jesus reminds us that his true nature goes beyond the flesh. The reference to feet of bronze can be seen as a symbol of strength and steadfastness, qualities needed to bear the weight of his mission. The image of eyes like blazing fire suggests a capacity to see beyond appearances, discerning truth and the hearts of people. This aspect of his character should be considered in any reflection on his identity. Beyond these passages, it's essential to recognize that the Bible in its essence does not seek to glorify physical appearance, but emphasizes the importance of actions and the heart. In 1 Samuel 16:7, God says to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him." The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. This idea reminds us that a person's true essence is not in how they present themselves, but in their intentions and the love they hold. Thus, the focus should always be on Jesus' teachings and actions, which are eternal and transformative. To better understand Jesus' appearance, it is essential to explore the geographical and historical context in which he lived. Jesus was born in Bethlehem and raised in Nazareth, locations that today are part of Israel. This region is known for its rich cultural diversity, shaped by the interaction of various ethnic groups, including Jews, Arabs, Africans, and Mediterranean peoples. This diversity resulted in a range of physical characteristics, but the Jewish population often shared common traits, such as darker skin and dark hair, influenced by the region's climate. The Middle East, where Jesus lived, was a meeting point for several civilizations, including the Egyptian, Greek, Roman, and Persian. These influences shaped not only the culture, but also the physical appearance of the people in the area. During the 1st century, the Jewish people were under Roman rule, and this occupation brought a blend of cultures that affected the local inhabitants' appearance. The presence of Roman soldiers, merchants, and travelers from diverse origins created a culturally dynamic environment. It's worth noting that the concept of race, as we understand it today, did not exist in the same way in Jesus' time. Identities were more based on ethnicity, religion, and culture than on specific physical characteristics. Jesus, as a Jew, was part of a context that included a complex tapestry of peoples and cultures. This reality highlights the ethnic diversity of the Jewish people, which included influences from many surrounding cultures. Jews in Palestine were Semitic, with characteristics likely including darker skin and dark hair, contrasting with the common European portrayal. Moreover, Jesus' Jewish heritage is crucial for our understanding. As a 1st century Jewish man, he belonged to a Semitic group historically known for having darker skin tones, adapted to the Middle Eastern environment. This understanding challenges Western representations of Jesus, where he is often depicted with fair skin and European features. The Bible references the ethnic diversity of the region in several passages, indicating that interactions between different peoples were common. For instance, in Genesis 10:6-7, we read about the nations that descended from Noah's sons, including Africans and Asians, illustrating the rich ethnic tapestry of that time. Thus, Jesus could not be seen as an isolated figure. He was part of a vibrant social and cultural context. His story cannot be told without considering the diversity of influences that shaped his life and ministry. Additionally, the geography of Palestine must also be considered. The region's hot and arid climate would have influenced Jesus' physical characteristics, suggesting that he likely had darker skin suitable for sun exposure. The climatic conditions also impacted the lifestyle and cultural practices of the people, creating an environment where individuals were shaped not only by their ethnic origins, but also by the conditions in which they lived. During the Renaissance, the image of Jesus was widely idealized, with European artists depicting him according to the beauty standards of the time, which favored European features. This practice was not merely artistic, it carried profound socio-cultural implications. Depicting Jesus as white and European not only distorts historical reality, but also reinforces narratives of racial and cultural superiority. Artists like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci contributed to the popularization of images that did not align with Jesus' ethnic origins. These portrayals shaped the perception of millions and established an image of Christ that became almost ubiquitous in Western churches and homes. Over time, this image became so ingrained in popular culture that many came to accept the depiction of Jesus as a white man as fact. These artistic representations have a lasting impact on the communities that consume them. For those who are marginalized or belong to different racial groups, the image of a European Jesus can create a sense of alienation and disconnection from the faith. The challenge, therefore, is to reimagine Jesus in a way that honors his cultural heritage while offering a welcoming space for all believers. The impact of these representations extends beyond the individual. It influences how religious institutions teach and interpret the Bible. A Eurocentric Jesus can lead to a distorted understanding of the message of inclusion and love that is central to Christianity. Therefore, the need for a more accurate representation of Jesus is vital to the spiritual health of diverse communities. The discussion about Jesus' skin color is not merely a historical question. It touches on profound cultural implications. When we talk about Jesus as a black figure, we're also addressing issues of representation and identity. The image of a black Jesus resonates particularly with communities that have experienced oppression and marginalization. This reinterpretation serves not only as a historical correction, but also as a symbol of resistance against narratives of cultural domination. Historically, the portrayal of Jesus as a white man is closely tied to European colonialism, where the image of a European Christ was used to legitimize the subjugation of non-white peoples. Jesus' figure became an emblem of power and moral superiority, while traits associated with other races were often devalued. Therefore, reclaiming the image of Jesus as a man of color is an act of empowerment and an invitation to reconnect with faith in terms that reflect the true diversity of human experience. In many contexts, perceiving Jesus as a white man reinforces the notion that Christianity is a Western religion, overlooking the rich heritage and contributions of non-white communities. By adopting a more inclusive view, we begin to see that Jesus' message is universal and that he identifies with all people, regardless of color or origin. The African American culture, for instance, has used the image of a black Jesus as a symbol of resistance and hope during the civil rights movement. This reinterpretation of Jesus' image is not just an aesthetic choice, but an important political act aimed at reclaiming dignity and identity for a frequently marginalized people. In many hymns and sermons, the image of a black Jesus is celebrated as a symbol of liberation, reflecting the connection between faith and the struggle for justice. This view of Jesus also aligns with the narratives of communities that have faced and continue to face oppression and injustice. For many, seeing Jesus as a black man means recognizing that he understands their struggles, their pains, and their hopes. He becomes an ally in their daily battles, a model of perseverance and resilience. This symbolism is deeply meaningful, especially in a world where racial injustices still persist. This questioning of Jesus' appearance offers an opportunity to re-examine the theological implications surrounding the Christian faith. If Jesus were frequently represented as a man with darker skin, it would challenge deep-seated assumptions and provoke important questions about how we have historically perceived him. Such a shift in perception would not only reshape representations of Christ, but also broaden the relevance of his message for diverse communities worldwide. Recognizing that Jesus likely had physical characteristics typical of the Middle East does not diminish his universal message. On the contrary, it strengthens it, making it more accessible to all. This reflection also encourages us to confront how Eurocentric ideologies have shaped church history and how the image of a black Jesus can open doors to a more inclusive and just understanding of the Christian faith. Liberation theology, which emerged largely in the Latin American context, emphasizes that Jesus identifies with the poor and marginalized. This perspective presents Jesus as a revolutionary leader who challenges unjust power structures and stands alongside the oppressed. Imagining Jesus as a black man deepens this theology, as many who identify with Jesus in the struggle for justice also face oppression in their daily lives. This view is not merely theoretical, it is reflected in a faith practice that actively seeks to challenge social injustices and fight for a more equitable society. In many African American communities, the image of a Black Christ is not merely a cultural adaptation, but a central element of spirituality that strengthens identity and resilience in the face of historical oppression. How Jesus is represented affects how people connect with him and, by extension, how they see themselves in the world. Moreover, this reinterpretation also creates space for a theology that includes the experiences and stories of marginalized communities. By recognizing the plurality of experiences within Christianity, the faith becomes a more welcoming and inclusive space. Voices that were once silenced or ignored now have a legitimate place in the Christian narrative, contributing to a deeper and more comprehensive understanding of Jesus' message. In discussing Jesus' skin color, it is essential to recognize the need for inclusivity in the representation of religious figures. Religious art has traditionally been dominated by images that do not reflect the diversity of humanity. This leads to a disconnection between the figure of Jesus and many of his followers, especially those who feel invisible or marginalized within prevailing narratives. By reimagining Jesus as a Black man, we are, in fact, inviting a broader range of experiences and voices to the table. This shift not only validates the experience of many believers, but also enriches the Christian narrative, allowing it to become a truer reflection of the diversity within God's creation. Christian art, in particular, has a responsibility to offer a more inclusive vision that not only acknowledges, but celebrates diversity in traits and stories. In doing so, the church can become a more welcoming and inviting space for all, regardless of racial or ethnic background. The role of the church as a space of inclusion is crucial in building a future where everyone can see themselves reflected in their faith. The challenge is to move away from traditions that reinforce division and prejudice, striving for a more authentic and comprehensive representation that allows all believers to feel at home. The image of a European Jesus did not emerge out of nowhere. It was shaped by centuries of colonialism and imperialism. During European expansion, many colonizers imposed their own views of God and sacred figures, shaping the perception of Jesus to align with their ideologies. This representation contributed to a belief system that valued whiteness and delegitimized the spirituality of non-European peoples. This history is not merely a matter of art, but a narrative that affects how faith is lived and perceived in different parts of the world. Colonized communities were often forced to accept a version of Christ that did not reflect their own reality, leading to a disconnect between faith and culture. This reinterpretation challenges the narrative of racial superiority and creates space for a Christianity that recognizes and honors the diverse expressions of faith worldwide. It is an act of reconciliation that seeks to correct historical injustices and promote a fairer understanding of the Christian message. The struggle against colonialism and its consequences remains relevant today. Communities affected by these histories of domination have the right to rewrite their narratives and affirm their identity within the Christian tradition. This shift in perspective is vital for the spiritual health of communities that continue to feel alienated by an image of Christ that does not reflect their reality. As we continue to explore Jesus' identity, we're invited to reflect on what his image represents for us today. In a world still grappling with deep issues of racism, inequality, and injustice, how we perceive Jesus can shape our understanding of love, acceptance, and compassion. Jesus, as a man of color, is an invitation to empathy and recognition of the struggles many face in our society. The image of a Black Jesus is not merely an alternative to Eurocentric representations, but a call for all of us to reconsider our own perceptions and biases. It challenges us to look inward and consider how we can be agents of change, fostering inclusion and justice within our communities. A black Jesus also raises the question of acceptance. In a world where racial prejudice still exists, it is crucial for believers to reflect on how embracing a more inclusive image of Jesus can promote a deeper sense of community. This reflection leads us to understand that true unity in faith is not found in conforming to cultural norms, but in celebrating the diversity that God created. In many African communities, for instance, Jesus is often depicted in ways that reflect local culture, with clothing and features that align more closely with the ethnic identity of those who worship him. This practice is not merely artistic, but a form of cultural affirmation and identity. Viewing Jesus as a man of color, therefore, is not just about physical traits, but about meaning and relevance to the daily realities of these communities. For many, he represents resistance against oppression and the fight for social justice, offering hope and a model of leadership. These alternative representations of Jesus can help dismantle harmful stereotypes and create a space where diverse voices and experiences can be heard. Including varied interpretations of Jesus in religious practice can enrich the spiritual experience and strengthen community bonds. In a world often divided by race, ethnicity, and culture, this diversity is vital for the health of the Christian faith. By revisiting the history of art, theology, and cultural narratives surrounding Christ, we can begin to deconstruct biases and assumptions that perpetuate distorted images. Educational institutions, churches, and communities have a responsibility to educate their members about the diversity of interpretations and representations of Jesus, fostering a more complete understanding of his message. This can include discussions on religious art and its implications, as well as exploring biblical texts that speak to diversity and inclusion. By encouraging open and inclusive dialogue, we can cultivate a culture that values plurality and acceptance, allowing more people to feel represented and welcomed within the Christian community. Moreover, education can play a fundamental role in shaping leaders and pastors who understand and embrace the diversity of the Christian experience. Theological training should include a critical view of the history of art and representations of Jesus, equipping future leaders to embrace and promote an inclusive theology. The history of Jesus' representation over the centuries is rich and complex. From early Christian depictions to Renaissance masterpieces, Jesus' image has been shaped by social, political, and cultural influences. Each era brought new interpretations that reflected the concerns and values of its society. However, the dominance of Eurocentric images throughout Christian history raises important questions about historical accuracy and fair representation. With growing awareness around issues of race and identity, many scholars and artists are revisiting these depictions and seeking ways to incorporate diversity into contemporary works of art. This new approach can create space for a deeper reflection on how Jesus is viewed and understood across different cultures, allowing him to be recognized as a figure that transcends barriers. The challenge of inclusion in religious practice goes beyond artistic representation. It extends to how faith communities welcome diverse voices and experiences into their communal life. Often, religious traditions have been shaped by narratives that privilege certain cultures while delegitimizing others. This dynamic can create barriers to the full participation of all believers. Christian communities have the opportunity to create a space where everyone can share their experiences and appreciate the richness of diversity. This can be achieved by fostering intergenerational dialogues where the voices of both young and old are heard and respected. Including the life stories of believers from different ethnic and racial backgrounds, can also enrich the community experience and strengthen bonds of solidarity. Inclusive theology is not merely about acceptance, but about actively promoting diversity within the Christian faith. This involves reinterpreting Jesus' teachings in light of contemporary realities. An inclusive theology considers the experiences of all believers and seeks interpretations that resonate with the struggles and hopes of diverse communities. A theology that acknowledges Jesus as a figure of color allows believers to see reflections of their own lives and experiences in biblical narratives. This connection can bring new life to the stories of the Bible, demonstrating that Jesus' message is relevant to everyone, regardless of their background or social status. The future of Jesus' image should be built on a foundation of inclusion and diversity. As Christian communities become increasingly multicultural, it is essential that the image of Jesus evolves to reflect this diversity. This does not mean discarding historical representations, but rather expanding our understanding and appreciation of the rich tapestry that Jesus' figure represents. This evolution requires courage and a willingness to challenge established norms. Communities that commit to portraying Jesus in his fullness as a man who transcended cultural and racial boundaries can inspire a new generation of believers who feel at home in their faith, recognizing themselves in the Christ they worship. One way to understand the figure of Jesus in a broader context is through the concept of intersectionality, which refers to how different forms of discrimination and oppression overlap. Jesus lived in a society marked by social inequality and political oppression. He interacted with women, Samaritans, and the marginalized of his time, challenging social and religious norms. Understanding Jesus within this framework of intersectionality helps us see how his message applies to contemporary struggles for social justice and equality. This analysis also invites communities to reflect on how racial, gender, and economic oppression intersect. A richer understanding of Jesus' message should include an examination of how he stood against the injustices of his time, inspiring believers to engage actively in the fight against oppressions that persist today. Personal narratives are a powerful tool for exploring Jesus' identity and his relevance in people's lives. Faith testimonies from diverse communities can illuminate how Jesus relates to their experiences. Many people of color, especially those who face racial discrimination, find comfort and inspiration in a Jesus who shares in their struggles. These stories are essential for building a deeper understanding of Jesus. They help create an emotional and spiritual connection that might be lost in a purely theological or academic approach. By sharing these narratives, communities can see how faith transcends history and becomes a source of resilience and empowerment. The image of a Black Jesus has a profound impact on communities that identify with this representation. For many, this image is a symbol of hope and resilience, embodying the struggle for dignity and recognition in a society that often marginalizes people of color. This identification goes beyond appearance, extending to the message of social justice that Jesus promoted throughout his life. The presence of a Black Jesus can also serve as a catalyst for dialogue about race and identity within Christian communities. This representation can open doors to meaningful discussions about how religious traditions should adapt and evolve to reflect the diversity of their congregations. Moreover, this image can inspire new generations to see themselves as active participants in the story of faith. Recognizing that Jesus can be represented in ways that reflect their own experiences, young people may find a deeper sense of belonging and purpose in their spiritual journey. When addressing the question of Jesus' skin color, it is important to remember that this is not an isolated discussion, but part of a larger dialogue about inclusion and representation within faith communities. The way we see Jesus can influence how we interact with one another, building bridges or walls of separation. As communities strive to be more inclusive, it is essential that this discussion becomes central to shaping their practices and traditions. What does it mean to embrace diversity in the representation of Jesus and in the voices that are heard in the life of the church? How can we create a space where all people feel valued and recognized? The answer to these questions is not simple, but it begins with a genuine commitment to listen and learn from one another. This openness can lead to a richer understanding of Jesus' message, allowing it to resonate in new contexts and for new generations. Ultimately, the question of Jesus' skin color invites us to explore the intersection of history, culture, and faith. Jesus, as a figure of color, is not merely a historical character but a symbol of resistance and solidarity with the marginalized. By re-evaluating Jesus' image in our present context, we are called to reflect on the significance of his message and how it resonates with the ongoing struggle for justice and equality in our world. The true importance of Jesus lies not in his appearance, but in the message of love and solidarity that has echoed through the centuries. This reflection not only helps us better understand who Jesus was, but also inspires us to live by the values he taught, promoting a vision of love and respect for all people, regardless of their background. By embracing the diversity of his image, we are, in fact, reaffirming the universality of his message, which transcends racial or cultural boundaries, inviting everyone to unite in the pursuit of truth, justice, and love. In this video, as we consider the possibility of Jesus being black, we are not merely offering a new perspective on his identity. We are also highlighting the importance of embracing diversity within our faith communities. It is crucial that we remain aware of the impact our representations have on those around us, ensuring that everyone can see themselves reflected in the story and faith we profess. May this journey of rediscovery lead us to a place of greater understanding and acceptance, where the image of Christ embodies the beauty and complexity of the humanity he came to save.